Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be starting our day with a keynote address by Joseph Bradley, who's the head of technology and digital at NEOM. He's somebody who's responsible for formulating the vision and delivery of the technology and digital ecosystem for NEOM, building the foundation to create cognitive cities. Working with leading international technology partners, Joseph and his team are establishing full-scale tech and digital infrastructure at NEOM, harnessing the power of networks and applications such as AI, Internet of Things, blockchain, and robotics. Today, as the keynote speaker, Joseph will talk about safeguarding data-powered cognitive communities like NEOM and will shed light on their proactive approach to staying ahead in the fast-moving landscape. Well, I'm sure you're as excited while I call upon screen and stage Joseph Bradley. Thank you so much, Joseph, for joining us. What a spectacular start it has been today, too. How are you feeling right now?
Outstanding and super excited to get a chance to talk with you about a topic that I'm very, very passionate about. I remember January 30th, 2020, and I'd ask you, where were you when that day happened? It's a very, very important day in our history because that's when we got introduced to the word COVID. And at that time, we would go to conferences and we would talk about digitization, we talk about agility, but we talk about those as like buzzwords. And then all of a sudden reality hit, where we were faced with change, where we saw in 6 months, $1 trillion leave the industry, like in restaurants. We saw 80 billion leave out of aviation and transportation. We say all this loss of value. And it really caused the industry to, I think, pause and really think about, are there some fundamental truths that we used to hold to be true that no longer are true? One of those about real time. Real time is everything. Well, in actuality, we found out that real time is simply too late. I recall a great story. My daughter, when she learned to drive in the US at 16 years old, right? She told me, Dad, I've been on this planet for 16 years. I know how to drive. And I told her, well, you might want to check your car for oil. She said, no, I got it. So she's driving on the road, TPT Cruiser, like 2002. And in real time, that check engine oil light came on. And in real time, that engine blew. She was off to the side of the road. What value was there? Yep, it was real time, but the damage had already been done. That's one of the core lessons we've seen with COVID. It's move data and decision-making as close as you can to the customer. So when you think about these three things, this kind of formed the motivation when I was joining NEOM, and I got caught with this bug and passion about being able to create a unique place, over 10,000 square meters, where we would have fundamentally the goal of redefining how we will progress as humans, how we will use technology hand in hand with nature to not only maintain the environment, but to enhance that environment. And we started talking about, what does it mean? Do we want NEOM to be a smart city? Is that good enough? Is reactive good enough? No, we want NEOM to be a cognitive city, one that is proactive, is predictive. It leverages not 1% of the data it produces, but it leverages 90% of the data that it produces. So how do we go about building this cognitive city? Three fundamental areas, three fundamental building blocks. The first is we have to create that cognitive foundation. What we mean by that cognitive foundation, that means that you have to have the ability to connect things. So there you're talking about 5G, 6G technologies, what we call the ability to create digital air. That means whatever you need from a bandwidth perspective, it is available, software defined everywhere. Next, you have to have the ability to compute, right? So we're talking about hyperscale data centers. If you think about the GCC area as a whole, you only have about a 4% cloud penetration. There's not a high penetration of hyperscalers in the area. So there's this huge opportunity based on NEOM's location to become the interconnection hub between the East and the West. Super excited about making that happen. And then finally, the third piece is the ability to contextualize. That means you have to have the artificial intelligence and the data architecture to be able to take all that great data and turn it into insights to be able to make decisions. So you have to build that cognitive foundation. Once you have that cognitive foundation, then you can roll out advanced applications. When we think about the areas that we're investing in, you're talking about artificial intelligence, you're talking about robotics, what we call human-machine interface technologies. They make up 90% of the 500 plus solutions that we're driving across all of our sectors and regions in NEOM. And lastly, we have to be able to attract the world's top talent. And we're super excited about reaching out to talent all around the world. And so when you think about that vision, at the cornerstone of that strategy, building the foundation, driving solutions, and then attracting talent, at the cornerstone of that is this notion that you have to be able to convince people, to excite people about that core asset, data. Data is so fundamental to what we hold to be true and how we want to enable our vision. So when you think about data, there's a couple of challenges that you have to overcome. And these challenges are not just pertinent for us at NEOM, but they're pertinent for you in an enterprise role. They're pertinent for you in countries outside, globally. These are things that we all have to address if we want to be successful. First off is you have to realize no trust means no data. No data means no value. It's just that simple. You can't talk about security, you can't talk about integrity unless you have trust. So how do you begin to establish trust? At NEOM, we think fundamentally there's two really important areas. The first has to do with consent. When you think about how you engage with solutions around data today, there's this end user license agreement, you click and you pray. You don't read it. There's pages and pages and pages of stuff, and you just want to use it, so you hope everything's okay. That's not good enough when you're going to build a cognitive city relying upon 90% of that data, right? You have to be able to attract it. So we are building the world's first consent management platform. That means it's a platform that starts with, hey, we have a data protection authority as your first layer of consent. That's a group that basically regulates and understands what data we can use and how we can use it. From there, there's data fiduciaries, which is a second layer of the consent model, where this is coded in. So now you're talking about medical facilities and government facilities that who, again, get very specific around how they want their data handled. The third area is what we call consent proxies. That means you as an individual, you may not have all the great insight to know about medical data, but you trust your doctor. And so you should be given the ability to say, hey, if my doctor says it's okay, then I'm going to give him or her the ability to be able to make that decision for me, to assign a proxy. Fourth layer of consent means you as the individual. Now, today, you have to go to all these sites and figure out where all your information is. In NEOM, we're going to bring that information to you so that you can understand exactly what you are saying yes to in one common location. And then finally, the last line of defense is the infrastructure itself. That means when we're collecting data, edge computing, we will be able to enforce your consent rules at the point of collection. So let me give you an idea. So let's assume you come to NEOM, you're excited, you go to the beach, you and your family, you're loving the picture, you see this beautiful sunset, you take a picture. You think nothing of it, you post it to Facebook, you're super excited. What you didn't see is maybe there happened to be a Muslim woman in the background who was changing her attire, or maybe they happened to be a family with young kids who don't want their kids on Facebook, but you didn't realize it. You're just super excited. You send it off to the world. Well, unfortunately, a friend of a friend of a friend knows that person, and now they're upset. And they're like, I'm never coming to NEOM again. What a horrible experience. People didn't understand. They took this picture. You have rights over your photo. That is your photo, but you do not have rights over their likeness. So what our consent management platform will enable us to do is, as you take that picture within 2 milliseconds, it would be able to determine at the edge, did this individual give their consent to be in your photograph? If they have not, their image would be dissolved, the image would be backfilled, and now you would have your photo before it's uploaded to the cloud. That's the idea, that's the notion. Okay, the second way, or the second area around building trust, which is really, really important, is you have to understand the ethics of data. If you don't have an ethics council, that means a council that isn't talking about how you collect data, but they're talking about if you should collect data. This is something that's really, really important. Let me give you a real simple question that you should ask yourself. Should you be allowed to access your customers' information? If you say yes, there's going to be people on the other side telling you, hey, guess what? What about privacy concerns? If you say no, you shouldn't, then there are going to be people telling you, well, how are you going to know your customer? As we've engaged in our ethics council, we've adopted a philosophy that says we fundamentally believe that there's no such thing as the ability to anonymize data anymore. No matter how you try, AI is good enough to figure out who you are. So what do? You have to invest in what we call synthetic data. Synthetic data is this new emerging field that basically allows you to create real data, fills the gaps, but it's not an actual person or individual. And because it's synthetic data, I can create as much of it as I need to, feeding my data science models. So in actuality, when you compare data science models that run real data with those that use synthetic data actually is far superior in terms of accuracy. So again, being able to really understand trust and establish trust by having a consent platform, and then also being able to establish an ethics use council is really fundamentally important. Okay, let's go to the second area around how to safeguard data. Let's talk about, everybody says, Joseph, how are you going to secure data? Secure data, it's all about cybersecurity. Why do you care about securing your data? It's because you assume that your data is valuable. Why do you say your data is valuable? It's because you assume your data is correct. That is something that we cannot assume in a cognitive environment. So therefore, we have to worry about cyber integrity. That means to ensure that the data is accurate, that it's correct before we have the security question. If the data is incorrect, it doesn't matter if it's secure or not, we're in trouble. So how do you begin to think about how do you make sure that your data is truly correct? Well, we're obviously investing in blockchain types technologies, which are immensely important and very, very, very critical to ensure that you have data lineage or trust to ensure the data is correct. We also invest in what we call knowledge graphs and artificial intelligence, where we can create a unique fingerprint, looking at over 1,000 variables for every single device to know that that data is accurate and that is actually being reported correctly from that device. There's also a thing that you need to be concerned about, which is about bias in your data. And this is really, really important. And so we like to think about, I like the acronym called FAIR, that your data, if you're looking at algorithms, you're looking at data science models, it needs to be F for fundamentally sound. That means you got to make sure that you're applying the correct models to begin with. It has to be accessible. That means understandable, explainable. Why is that? That because machines can be responsible, but they can't be accountable. In other words, a machine can't go to jail. Humans will go to jail, right? There's a problem, you're going to be held accountable. Okay. Next, it has to be inclusive. That means that you want to make sure that you have enough data that's representative of the group that you are applying this model to. And then finally, it needs to be reversible. That means, how would you feel if this model was applied to you as an individual? So those are just a few ways in which you can ensure that you, again, have strong integrity when you're thinking about your data. Okay, lastly, we have to talk about how do you secure cybersecurity? How do you ensure that your data is secure within this framework? First is very, very important to understand that we need to talk about the full attack continuum. We talk about security. So there, we're talking about what do you do before, during, and after an attack. Immensely important. Secondly, we want to use the same tools that, quite frankly, hackers are using, artificial intelligence, human knowledge graphs. We want to use those same tools to ensure that we are actually defending our network. This is really, really, really critically important. In addition to this story, I'm sure many of you have heard of red teams and blue teams, where you are trying to make sure that you have various different groups to test your system. Here is something that I'm going to tell you has been immensely important at NEOM as we think about security. When you think about the employees that we have at NEOM, we have over 50 plus different nationalities working at NEOM. Inclusion is not just the right thing to do, but it's the safe and secure thing to do when it comes to security. And this is really, really important. When you think about diversity, most people don't talk about this when it comes to security, but it's really important. Why? It's because you're protecting a diverse group of people. So you need a diverse group of thinking to ensure that you understand all of the threat areas, again, before, during, and after the attack. So when you think about diversity, diversity is the potential to create value. That means you can have a diverse group of security specialists, but your role in establishing and protecting your organization is to move from diversity to inclusion. That means the full realization of value by driving the full participation of everyone involved to be able to ensure that your end-to-end security policy is where it needs to be. So I hope this talk has given you some informed interest around what we're building at NEOM, how we think about the future, and ultimately how we are building this cognitive city. I will leave you with this. Many people ask, how do you deal, Joseph, with trying to project and predict all these things that are happening in the future? I will tell you one simple thing, and I found this to be very, very helpful throughout my career when I think about advanced technologies, how we're deploying. Don't worry about what you don't know. Don't spend any time worrying about trying to project the future. But what you need to do is wake up each and every day and fundamentally challenge what you believe to be true. Thank you guys, and I hope you have a great conference.